In the 17th century, Scotland embarked in one of the most disastrous business ventures in history. With dreams of becoming a colonial power, the Scots sailed across the Atlantic to the Isthmus of Panama to establish a trading colony. But this grand plan, known as the Darien Scheme, ended in catastrophe and nearly destroyed Scotland's economy. This is the story of how Scotland went overseas and in process sold their independence. In the 1690s, Scotland was struggling. It had been battered by years of poor harvests, economic hardship, and political instability. Desperate for a way to lift the country out of poverty, Scottish leaders turned their eyes to overseas trade. Inspired by the success of England's trading companies, like the East India Company, they believed the key to prosperity lay in creating their own colony and becoming a global trading power. The mastermind behind the plan was William Paterson, a Scottish financier and visionary. Paterson had a bold idea to establish a Scottish trading colony on the Isthmus of Panama, in a region known as Darien. This colony would become a vital hub linking trade routes between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, allowing Scotland to control a global trading network. It seemed like a perfect location, untouched by European powers and rich with potential. In 1698, the first fleet of 5 ships carrying over 1,200 settlers left Scotland bound for Panama. The mission was ambitious and hopeful, with Scots from all walks of life investing heavily in the venture. Nearly 25% of Scotland's total capital was poured into the scheme, an enormous gamble for a country already on the brink of financial collapse. But when the Scots arrived at Darien, reality set in. The land was not rich, fertile paradise they had been promised. The terrain was inhospitable, swampy, humid, and infested with diseases like malaria and yellow fever. The Scots were unprepared for the harsh conditions. To make matters worse, the local indigenous population was less than welcoming, and Spanish forces, who claimed control of the region, were soon alerted to the Scottish presence. Within months, the colony was in serious trouble. Supplies quickly ran out, and many of the settlers began to succumb to disease. Attempts to establish trade with local tribes and nearby colonies failed, and the Scots found themselves isolated. Meanwhile, England, Scotland's supposed ally, refused to support the colony for fear of angering Spain, with whom they had trade agreements. Facing constant pressure from Spain, lack of support from England, and unforgiving environment, the Darien Scheme rapidly unraveled. In just a few short months, hundreds of settlers died, and by mid-1699, the first colony was abandoned. But Scotland didn't give up. A second wave of settlers was sent later that year, unaware of the fate that awaited them. When the second wave arrived, they found the remnants of the first colony in ruins. Disease, starvation, and attacks from the Spanish had left the settlement desolate. Despite their best efforts, the new settlers faced the same challenges. In 1700, the last survivors were forced to abandon the colony completely, and the Darien Scheme was officially over. The failure of the Darien Scheme was a devastating blow to Scotland. Thousands of lives were lost, and the country's economy was left in shambles. Many Scots had invested everything they had into the venture, and when it failed, they were financially ruined. The collapse of Darien Scheme played a significant role in pushing Scotland toward the Act of Union in 1707, which united Scotland and England into a single political entity, the United Kingdom. For many, the failure of the scheme and the resulting financial disaster left Scotland with little choice but to seek economic security through union with England. In the end, Scotland's attempt to become a colonial power ended not just in financial ruin, but also with the loss of its independence.